Let me tell you about something that happened 4 days ago, January 3rd, 2026. Something that reveals everything about how empire works, how democracy is imposed, how international law disappears when convenient. The United States military invaded Venezuela, bombed Caracas, raided the presidential residence, killed 32 Cuban military advisors, captured President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, flew them to Guantanamo, then to New York, and put them in federal prison on narco-terrorism charges, and called this law enforcement operation. Not invasion, not kidnapping, not violation of sovereignty. Law enforcement, arresting a drug dealer who happens to be president of a country. When Maduro appeared in Manhattan federal court, he said, "I am innocent. I am a decent man. I was kidnapped." And the United States responded, "No, this was law enforcement. You are narco-terrorist, you are drug trafficker, you are criminal." Not president, criminal. Therefore, no immunity, no sovereignty, no protection under international law. This is what I want to talk about. Not whether Maduro is good or bad, not whether he is legitimate or illegitimate, but what this operation reveals about power, about law, about how empire justifies itself. Let me start with the actual sequence. The facts of what happened. Early morning, January 3rd, US Special Forces FBI hostage rescue team conducted raid on Fuerte Tiuna, Venezuela's largest military complex, where Maduro lived with his wife Cilia Flores. Bombing, ground assault, heavy casualties, 32 Cubans killed, unknown number of Venezuelan military, significant damage to infrastructure, civilian casualties, unconfirmed. Maduro and his wife captured, transported to USS Iwo Jima, then Guantanamo Bay, then New York, Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, same facility that held Jeffrey Epstein, R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, Sam Bankman-Fried, President of Venezuela, in Brooklyn Federal Prison, awaiting trial, January 5th. Court appearance, Judge Alvin Hellerstein. Maduro says, "I am innocent. I did not know my rights. Your Honor is informing me now. I was kidnapped. Judge, not guilty plea entered. Remain detained until March 17th hearing. Bail denied." And Trump gives press conference, says, "This was extraordinary military operation, overwhelming military power, air, land, and sea, spectacular assault, like nothing since World War II, most stunning display of American military might in history." Then says, "United States is now in charge of Venezuela. We are going to run the country until we can do safe, proper, judicious transition." Balkan done, not helping Venezuela, not supporting Venezuelan people, running the country in charge. We control. And then says, "We are taking control of Venezuela's massive oil reserves, 303 billion barrels, about 1/5 of world reserves. American companies will invest billions to refurbish the oil industry." Do you see? Do you see how quickly the mask drops? How fast we move from law enforcement to taking oil, from arresting drug dealer to controlling country, from justice to resource extraction? This is imperial logic in its purest form. And I want to show you exactly how it works, how each step is justified, how each move is legitimized. Let me start with the legal justification, the official reason for the operation. In March 2020, US Department of Justice indicted Maduro, charged him with narco-terrorism conspiracy, drug trafficking, partnering with Colombian guerrillas, FARC, to flood the United States with cocaine, offered $15 million reward for information leading to his arrest, later increased to 25 million, then 50 million. Largest bounty ever placed on foreign head of state. So US says Maduro is criminal. is drug trafficker, has outstanding arrest warrant. We have right to arrest him, to bring him to justice, to enforce our laws. This sounds reasonable, yes? If someone commits crimes against the United States, US has right to prosecute, has right to arrest, has right to jurisdiction. But here is the problem. Here is where the logic breaks. Maduro is not just person, not just individual. He is head of state, president of sovereign country, and under international law, heads of state have immunity. Cannot be arrested, cannot be prosecuted, cannot be violated. This principle dates to 1812. Schooner Exchange v. McFadden, US Supreme Court case. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote, "The person of the sovereign is exempt from arrest or detention within foreign territory." This is foundational principle of international order. If heads of state can be arrested by foreign powers, no country is safe, no leader is protected, collapses. So US needs to get around this, needs to eliminate the immunity. And the method is elegant, simple, ideologically perfect. We declare Maduro illegitimate, not real president, not legitimate leader. Therefore, no immunity, no protection, no sovereignty. July 2024 election was fraudulent. Opposition won. Edmundo González Urrutia is legitimate president. Maduro stole election, therefore Maduro is not president, is impostor. And if he's not president, then he has no immunity. Is just criminal. Is drug dealer who happens to occupy presidential palace, who happens to claim title, but who is not actually legitimate. Therefore, we can arrest him, can invade to get him, can violate sovereignty, because sovereignty does not belong to illegitimate ruler. Do you see the operation? Do you see how this works? First, define the leader as illegitimate. Second, therefore, no immunity. Third, therefore, we can arrest. Fourth, therefore, invasion is law enforcement. Each step follows logically from previous. Each move is justified by framework. But the framework itself is constructed, is created to justify the action we want to take. We want to remove Maduro, want to control Venezuela, want to take the oil. So we construct legal framework that makes this legitimate. But here is the deeper question, the question that reveals the ideology. Who decides legitimacy? Who determines which elections are valid? Who has authority to declare head of state illegitimate? The United States. The United States decides unilaterally, without international consensus, without legal process, just decides. July 2024 election, National Electoral Council declares Maduro winner. Opposition claims fraud. International observers raise concerns. Some countries recognize Maduro, others recognize González. Disputed election, contested result, unclear outcome, like many elections in many countries throughout history. But United States declares this election was fraudulent. Maduro lost, González won, therefore Maduro is illegitimate. And because Maduro is illegitimate, we can invade. Not through international process, not through UN resolution, not through multilateral agreement, just American declaration. American declaration. We say he is illegitimate, therefore he is illegitimate. Therefore we can arrest him. Therefore invasion is legal. This is imperial logic, where legitimacy is determined by empire, where sovereignty exists only when empire recognizes it, where international law applies only when empire agrees. And the beautiful ideological move is, this is presented as upholding law, as defending democracy, as supporting Venezuelan people, as justice, not as power, not as domination, not as imperialism, as law enforcement, as democratic intervention, as liberation. Now let me tell you about the oil, because this is where ideology becomes transparent, where the real motive shows itself. Trump says, we are taking control of Venezuela's oil reserves, 303 billion barrels. American companies will invest to refurbish industry. Balkan, Talic, Ardikiepro. Not we will help Venezuela manage its resources. Not we will support Venezuelan people in controlling their wealth. We are taking control, we American companies, American investment. This is not hidden, not implied, not suggested, openly stated. We invaded, we captured president. We are now in charge and we are taking the oil. But wait, the operation was about drugs. Yes? About narco-terrorism, about stopping cocaine flow to United States, about law enforcement. Look at the indictment, read the charges: narco-terrorism, conspiracy, drug trafficking, partnering with FARC, flooding US with cocaine. But Trump blames Venezuela for fentanyl crisis, says Venezuelan drug operations are killing Americans, says this is about stopping fentanyl, except the word fentanyl appears nowhere in the indictment. 0 times not mentioned, not charged, not relevant. Because the indictment is about cocaine, about operations from 1990s and 2000, about partnerships formed decades ago. So the public justification is fentanyl, current crisis, immediate threat. But the legal justification is cocaine, historical operations, past activities. And the actual motive is oil, resources, control, 303 billion barrels of motivation. This is how ideology works. Multiple layers, multiple justifications, each addressing different audience, each serving different function. For American public, fentanyl crisis, drug epidemic, protecting American lives, stopping drugs. For legal system, cocaine trafficking, narco-terrorism, outstanding indictment, law enforcement. For geopolitics, oil reserves, strategic control, American investment, resource extraction. Each narrative true in its own way, each justification valid within its own logic, but together revealing the structure, the real operation, the actual motive. We want the oil, so we construct legal case, so we mobilize public concern, so we justify military intervention and call it law enforcement. Now let me tell you about precedent, about history, about how this is not new, is not exceptional, is pattern. 1989, Panama, Manuel Noriega, military dictator, former CIA asset turned enemy, indicted on drug trafficking charges. December 20, 1989, US invades Panama, Operation Just Cause, 26,000 troops, hundreds killed, Noriega captured, brought to US tried, convicted, imprisoned, and justified as law enforcement operation, arresting drug dealer, bringing criminal to justice. 37 years later, same script, same logic, same justification. Difference is, Noriega was actual dictator, had no democratic legitimacy, no election to dispute, just military rule. But method is same, invade sovereign country, capture head of state, bring to US for trial, call it law enforcement. This is imperial playbook, established procedure, proven method. When we want to remove leader, when we want to control country, when we want to take resources, we indict on drug charges, we offer bounty, we wait for opportunity, then we invade and call it law enforcement, call it justice, call it legitimate. The precedent is clear. The pattern reveals this is not about law, it's about power. is about imperial control, disguised as legal process. Now let me tell you about international reaction, about what other countries said, because the response reveals everything. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, "I am deeply concerned that rules of international law have not been respected. The Charter enshrines prohibition of threat or use of force against territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Russia, China, strong condemnation, called it kidnapping, demanded Maduro's release, violation of sovereignty." But also France, Colombia, US allies also expressed concern, said operation undermined international law, set dangerous precedent. Even Democratic Senator Mark Warner, Vice Chairman of Senate Intelligence Committee, said, "Does this mean any large country can indict ruler of smaller adjacent country and take that person out? This is the question, the central question. If US can do this, can China do this? Can Russia do this? Can any powerful country simply declare leader illegitimate and invade?" And if answer is yes, then international order collapses. Then sovereignty means nothing. Then only thing that matters is power. But if answer is no, if only US can do this, then we are not talking about law. We are talking about privilege, about exception, about empire that operate above rules. And this is exactly what US claims, not explicitly but implicitly, through action, through practice, through operation. We can invade because we are United States, because we enforce international order, because we defend democracy, because we are exceptional. Not because we follow law, but because we are the law. We determine what is legitimate. We decide what is legal. We enforce. This is imperial logic where international law applies to everyone except empire, where sovereignty exists for everyone except when empire wants to violate it. And all of this is justified as upholding order, as defending law, as protecting democracy. The ideology is perfect because empire's self-exemption is framed as law enforcement. Empire's violation is framed as upholding rules. Empire's domination is framed as liberation. Now, let me tell you about the opposition, about María Corina Machado, because this reveals the final ideological operation, the ultimate betrayal. María Corina Machado, leader of Venezuelan opposition, won 2025 Nobel Peace Prize for fighting dictatorship, for defending democracy, for representing Venezuelan people. She supported US operation, initially celebrated Maduro's capture, said Venezuelans, the hour of freedom has arrived, called for immediate installation of Edmundo González as president. This is the democratic opposition. This is who US claims to support. This is the legitimate government. This is democracy. But then Trump holds press conference and says, we are in charge. We are running the country. We will determine transition. Machado says, install González, the legitimate winner, the democratic choice. Trump says, we are working with Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's vice president, Maduro loyalist. Part of Maduro's regime. Wait, what? We invaded to remove Maduro, to support democracy, to install legitimate government. But we are working with Maduro's vice president. Rodriguez was sworn in as interim president by National Assembly, Maduro's National Assembly, Chavista National Assembly, not democratic opposition, not González. And Trump said, we will work with her, will ensure transition. Do you see what happened? The democratic opposition was abandoned. The Nobel Prize winner was ignored. The legitimate president was rejected because democracy was never the goal. Removing dictatorship was never the point. Supporting Venezuelan people was never the plan. The goal was control, was taking oil, was ensuring compliant government, and Delcy Rodriguez, former Maduro official, is more compliant than María Corina Machado, is more controllable than democratic opposition, because democratic opposition has legitimacy, has popular support, has mandate, might actually represent Venezuelan people, might actually control resources. But Maduro, loyalist, has no legitimacy, has no support, depends entirely on US backing. Will do what US says, will give what US wants, will cooperate. This is the democracy we export. This is the liberation we provide. Remove elected leader we dislike. Ignore opposition we claim to support. Install puppet we can control and call it transition, call it democracy, call it freedom, call it justice. The ideology is complete. The operation is perfect. We invaded for democracy, but we ignored democratic opposition. We invaded for freedom, but we installed authoritarian loyalists. We invaded for Venezuelan people, but we took the oil. Every justification is inverted. Every claim is opposite of reality. Every stated goal is betrayed by action. This is not contradiction. This is not failure. This is how empire works, how power operates, how ideology functions. Now, let me return to the central question, the core issue. What does this operation reveal about law, about democracy, about international order? First, law serves power, not constrains power. When empire wants to act, law is constructed to justify. When empire wants to violate sovereignty, sovereignty is declared invalid. The indictment came in 2020. 6 years of waiting. Why now? Why January 2026? Because Trump wanted, because opportunity existed, because political conditions were favorable, not because law demanded, not because justice required, because power decided. Law is tool, is instrument, is weapon used when useful, ignored when inconvenient. Second, democracy is justification, not goal. We invaded for democracy, but we ignored democratic opposition. We invaded for freedom, but we installed authoritarian loyalists. Democracy is whatever serves imperial interests. If democratic opposition cooperates, then democracy is supported. If democratic opposition resists, then democracy is redefined. Legitimacy is determined by compliance, not by elections, not by popular support, by cooperation with empire. Third, international law exists only for the weak. Empire exempts itself, operates above rules, decides what is legal by acting. When powerful country invades weak country, this is violation of international law. Unless powerful country is United States, then this is law enforcement. The double standard is not hidden, is not denied, is asserted as privilege, as right, as exception. We are different. We are exceptional. Rules do not apply to us because we make the rules, because we enforce the rules, because we enforce the rules. Fourth, kidnapping becomes law enforcement through language, through framing, through ideological. We did not kidnap head of state. We arrested criminal. We did not invade country. We conducted operation. We did not violate sovereignty. We enforced. Every act of power is renamed. Every violation is justified. Every crime becomes legal procedure. This is Orwellian perfection, where kidnapping is arrest, where invasion is operation, where imperialism is law enforcement. And fifth, the real motive is always revealed. Eventually, Trump says, we are taking the oil, not hiding, not concealing, just stating. Because stating does not matter, because revelation changes nothing, because everyone knows already, and knowing changes nothing. We all understand this is about resources, about control, about power. But understanding does not prevent, knowing does not stop. The ideology works even when exposed, even when revealed, even when everyone knows. Because what can Venezuela do? What can international community do? What can anyone do? Protest, issue statements, condemn at UN, and then what? Then nothing. Power acts, others react, power takes, others complain, power violates, others condemn. But power continues because power is power. This is the democracy you must accept at gunpoint. Not because you choose, but because you have no alternative. The guns are real, the bombs are real, the invasion is real, and your choice is accept or resist. And resistance means more bombing, more killing, more destruction. So you accept. You accept. Maduro in Brooklyn prison, you accept. US control of oil, you accept. Puppet government, you accept. Empire. And this acceptance is called liberation, is called democracy, is called freedom, is called justice. Welcome to law enforcement. Welcome to the kidnapping that is not kidnapping. Welcome to the invasion that is operation. Welcome to the imperialism that is democracy. Nicolás Maduro sits in Metropolitan Detention Center, Brooklyn, awaiting trial on charges from 20 years ago, while United States takes oil, while Trump installs puppet government, while empire operates openly, and we call this law, call this justice, call this. This is not aberration, not exception, not Trump being Trump. This is how empire works. This is what international order looks like from underneath. This is the law that powerful impose on weak, and the weak must accept, must comply, must surrender at gunpoint, while calling it freedom. The democracy you must accept at gunpoint. The law you must obey while empire violates. The sovereignty that exists only when empire permits. Welcome to international order. Welcome to the rules that apply to everyone except empire. Welcome to the kidnapping that became law enforcement through simple declaration. Maduro was right. He said, I was kidnapped. And he is right. But kidnapping by empire is not kidnapping, is arrest, is law enforcement, is justice. Because empire decides, empire defines, empire determines what is legal, what is legitimate, what is true. And if you disagree, if you resist, if you refuse to accept, then you are next. Then you are illegitimate, then you are criminal, then you await arrest, then you await the bombs, then you await Brooklyn. This is the democracy you must accept at gunpoint, with bombs, with invasion, with no alternative. Welcome to law enforcement. Welcome to the new world order. Welcome to empire unmasked. Ce que j'observe n'est pas une crise conjoncturelle glaciale, mais l'épuisement d'une structure.